Welcome, everyone. Today, in honor of Jerusalem Day, Yom Yerushalayim, we're diving into an explainer that is it's absolutely awe-inspiring. We're looking at first-hand historical accounts from the Six-Day War. But listen, these are not your standard tactical breakdowns. We're examining officially documented military testimonies of events that completely defied all natural logic. We're talking about the inexplicable events that ensured the preservation of the land of Israel and really paved the way for the historic reunification of our eternal capital, Jerusalem. So let's dive right in.
Now we have to start with this incredibly powerful hook. Take a look at this quote from the Egyptian president at the time, Gamal Abdel Nasser. He was trying to explain the total, sudden collapse of his forces, and his official explanation was staggering. He said the Egyptian army suffered a heart attack. He couldn't point to a specific flanking maneuver by Israel or some major technological failure. An entire heavily armed military apparatus just inexplicably collapsed in the opening hours. And this drops us right into the overarching mystery we're unpacking today. How exactly do you explain the unexplainable?
And that brings us directly to our primary sources for today's explainer. The official military heading for these accounts is literally La Hezber, which translates to without explanation. Now, I really want to emphasize this. These are not urban legends. They aren't campfire myths. These are officially recorded testimonies from commanders and soldiers on the ground. These are hard-nosed military men trained to analyze data and logistics, openly admitting that what they experienced completely defied all conventional tactical logic.
So let's look at the very first recorded incident. Picture the intense tension of the Golan Heights front. You've got Colonel Albert's armored brigade making a desperate push up the mountain. Suddenly, the lead half-track, the vehicle at the very front of the column, just breaks down. The path is incredibly narrow, so there's absolutely no room to bypass it. The entire Israeli column is halted dead in its tracks, totally exposed, and they are taking a massive downpour of heavy Syrian fire. Retreat meant absolute defeat, so the commander is forced to make this agonizing, fatalistic tactical choice. They literally have to blow up their own vehicle, sacrificing that asset just to clear the path for the rest of the brigade. The demolition order is given, the explosives are prepped, and then the official report just states it plainly. Nes Karakan, a miracle happened here. Right before they could detonate it, the half-track just started moving. The mechanical failure completely vanished into thin air. The vehicle continued its climb up the steep mountain as if absolutely nothing had happened, clearing the path and saving the brigade. It's one of those moments that just leaves you entirely speechless.
Okay, let's move to the next testimony and see how this suspension of reality just builds. This is the Battle of Ketef. It's pitch black. An Israeli infantry unit is advancing under the cover of darkness, but they are being heavily bombarded by artillery. Shrapnel is flying everywhere. The commander screams the order to charge forward, to close the distance with the enemy. But as they hit the perimeter fence, they realize with absolute horror that they are standing on the edge of an old, active minefield. The commander is faced with a literal impossible choice. Stay put and let his men be slaughtered by the incoming artillery, or order them to run straight through a live minefield. He chooses the mines.
So the soldiers charge forward into the darkness, stepping exactly where they shouldn't, bracing for the inevitable explosions beneath their boots. But the explosions never come. The source text states it with this profound simplicity. It says, but at night, for some reason, no one was hurt by them. The next morning, when the sun finally came up, those same soldiers looked back at the field they had just sprinted across. They saw the active, deadly mines clearly visible right there in the dirt. They had run right through them. Not a single soldier triggered a mine, not one single casualty.
And this defiance of natural law just keeps happening across all these different fronts. Here's another late-night scene from the text. This time, it involves an ammunition truck. This truck is parked next to a building, and it's loaded to the brim with old bombs. Suddenly, an incoming enemy shell comes screaming in and scores a direct hit right on the cargo bed of the truck. By every known law of physics and chemistry, this should trigger a massive secondary explosion that would instantly bury the troops and destroy all the surrounding buildings. But here is what actually happened. The enemy shell impacts and does absolutely nothing. It miraculously fails to detonate. The source actually describes how this deadly enemy explosive simply came to rest directly on top of the pile of Israeli bombs in the truck. It just lay there. Again, we are grounding this in a hyper-specific, terrifying reality. This isn't just some vague feeling of luck, it's a physical impossibility sitting right in front of the soldier's eyes. Now, the pacing of these events is just breathless. Listen to the frantic armor engagement of Sergeant Gideon.
He's sitting in his patent tank, and suddenly he spots heavy movement. 3 massive Stalin T-34 tanks are bearing down on his singular position. It's literally 1 against 3. He writes that he fired his cannon simply thinking, well, this is it, I'm going to take a shell to the face. But instead, boom, he destroys the first tank. He fires again, boom, he takes out the second tank. He adjusts his sights one more time and miraculously takes out the third.
And this next part brilliantly illustrates the sheer surrealism of the war. After single-handedly destroying 3 tanks, Sergeant Gideon's tank actually runs over a mine. It leaps into the air. He thinks it's all over, but the tank just lands and keeps driving. It continues to fight all the way to Rafah. The text itself asks, in total disbelief, if this invincible journey was just a waking dream. I mean, how can a machine of war take a direct mine strike, completely ignore the laws of mechanics, and just keep rolling?
To really put this into historical context, Major General Elad Peled provides a brilliant comparison. Think about the Maginot Line and the Atlantic Wall. These were massive World War II fortifications that terrified entire global armies into avoiding them completely. Now contrast that with the Syrian bunkers on the Golan Heights. General Peled notes these were actually more heavily fortified. And yet, the vastly outnumbered Israeli forces didn't bypass them. They marched straight up the mountain, head-on, into the fortresses, and conquered them. The raw courage and the impossible odds are just staggering.
Section 1. The Wondrous Breakthrough to Jerusalem.
As we celebrate Jerusalem Day today, we see how all of these inexplicable victories set the stage for the historic reunification of our eternal capital. We're going to look closely at the testimony of Colonel Uri Ben-Ari. He was the commander of the armored brigade that fought the incredibly fierce battles in the mountainous terrain surrounding Jerusalem. Let's set the stage here. Moving heavy armor up steep, winding, heavily defended mountain roads is basically every military strategist's worst nightmare.
So, the crucial point is how Ben-Ari himself viewed what they accomplished. Read this quote with me. If someone had said, to move a whole brigade from the lowlands to the mountains, enter battle immediately and achieve victory immediately, people would see him as a peddler of false dreams. My brigade did exactly that. He is saying that logically, mathematically, strategically, what they did was a fantasy, a false dream. Yet, that impossible dream became the reality that liberated Jerusalem. It's an immense source of pride and a clear acknowledgement of something far greater than just military tactics at work.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Gamal Abdel Nasser's quote about his army suffering a public heart attack. The source text ends by asking this incredibly provocative question. Who or what causes an entire public to suffer a heart attack? Who paralyzed the enemy, while simultaneously guiding half-tracks up mountains, blinding soldiers to minefields and turning deadly artillery shells to stone? As we celebrate Yom Yerushalayim today, these documented testimonies leave us with a profound optimistic vision. They remind us that the survival of this nation and the beating heart of Jerusalem as our spiritual center defies earthly explanation. It's a wondrous, eternal reality, almost like a prophecy fulfilled before our very eyes. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Keep studying the sources, and I'll see you in the next explainer.